Would you like to live your best life possible, regardless of your imperfections? Discover cutting-edge tools and inspiration to let go of your limitations and expand your life beyond what you've ever imagined. On Imperfect Brilliance, we help you tap into your unique gifts and talents, uncovering and letting your brilliance shine. Join Certified Facilitator and Coach Betsy McLoughlin as she delves into different areas of your life to get unstuck and create the life that is truly possible for you. Betsy has changed her life by utilizing the tools and techniques she is sharing with you. What if your willingness to acknowledge your brilliance is the catalyst to creating a new reality? When you stop judging you, what else can you create in your life and in the world? Join Betsy live every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern to create magical and joyous possibilities for an hour of laughs, questions, tips, and more. We are excited to contribute and play with you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Imperfect Brilliance. I am your host, Betsy McLoughlin, and I have the joy of welcoming today my guest, Emily Russell. So first of all, welcome, Emily. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Betsy. Hello, hello. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me.
You're so very welcome. And here's a question for everybody. Are you a neon sheep? Are you willing to choose your difference? Are you a brightly colored neon sheep pretending to be like the other white sheep in the flock? That's what we're going to be talking about today, and the fact that if you don't choose your difference, the world will never have access to it. And I just love that whole subject, and we will definitely, get a lot more information from Emily. But before we do that, I would love just to give you guys a little information on Emily. And she is an Access Consciousness Certified Facilitator. She is a speaker. She is a mama of 2 little girls that she affectionately calls her neon lamps, which I love. I think that's just so adorable. She loves to have fun. She is a social media maven and all kinds of other amazing and wonderful things. Is there anything that you would like to add to that?
I think you covered it. Okay. So I was just talking with someone else about this neon sheep idea, and I was also saying for Access Consciousness, the company, I have the title of Worldwide Kitten Herder, which is kind of funny with different creatures, and playing with that sort of fits in with the neon sheep theme as well, I think.
It sure does. It sure does. So tell us a little bit about how this idea for the neon sheep came about. We'll start there.
Yeah, it's funny. It's one of the questions. So I know if you guys have listened to Betsy's show or interested in Access Consciousness, we talk a lot about just the power of asking questions and what that can change when you start asking a question, not from the place of figuring out an answer, but just kind of from the space of, wow, what awareness can I get from that? What have I never thought of before? And so one of the very first questions I heard in an Access class, or maybe it was a video, was how different are you willing to be? Which seems like a pretty simple question. And also, how willing are you to be different? And it's so interesting, those questions for me, and looking at that, how different we all are, and also how willing are you actually to know how different you are and then show up in the world as that difference? Because that can sometimes be very judgeable, or tends to be judged for whatever reason in the world, which is why so many people go around trying to fit in, not even maybe thinking about it, but just that. And so that analogy of sheep, like, we sort of have this analogy of sheep following each other and a white sheep being, the normal. And then there's the whole saying about, the black sheep of the family, and feeling like the one that never fits in. And so what I found is we tend to either do one of those things, right? We feel like we never fit in. Maybe we've been called the black sheep of your family, of your friends, whatever that is. Or then that maybe out of resistance to that, or not even just because it's how it shows up, we try to fit in for whatever reason to avoid being judged, to make things easier, seemingly, or kind of blend in with the other white sheep. And so the neon sheep idea is it came from, wow, if we were willing to just be so different and not out of resistance to something, but just actually how you are, because how you are is different. It's not something you have to force, but it is an adventure to discovering, because we do tend to cover up so much of that throughout our lives for various different reasons. But so the neon sheep is like, okay, what if you could be all those bright colors and spaces and differences that you already are?
Well, it's such a fun invitation, like, again, that playful energy. And I mentioned at the very beginning that Emily loves to have fun. And so she is infusing that in this creation. And I'm wondering, from that aspect, are people responding to that element of it?
Yeah. So if you guys are listening, and I'm sure there's links in the show, but basically, I don't know, a few weeks ago, I started a Facebook group called the Neon Sheep Lounge, which is free. Anyone can play in there. And that stemmed from several months ago during, sometime during this whole lockdown, quarantine, depending how different wherever you are in the world. But I did 15 days called Facebook Lives in a paid thing. It was $30. You can still get the replay of those, called Being the Neon Sheep Exposed. And we covered all these different areas of, like, what is it like to be different with your family, in relationships, with money. And then after that ended, it was 2 weeks. There was something else that wanted to be created, because there was so much interest in this topic, and there is so many things to explore. So recently we started this Facebook group where everyone could play. And it's been such a space, and there's been so much gratitude in there from people from all over the world, but of just having a place where we can kind of say, hey, I know I'm different, I don't quite know how to get there, or it's so great to have people who support me choosing more, no matter what that looks like. And so it's just kind of a space where we're all, like, contributing to each other, and it's been so much fun.
Wow. And, so when people have worked hard their whole life to not stand out, to not be the neon sheep in the herd, to not be singled out, what are some of the tips that you could give people for actually exploring what that is for themselves?
Wow. So there's a lot of different spaces we could go. And it's funny, when you ask it this time, what comes up is, what if you looked at what you've thought that's benefited for you, like why you've actually done that? Because things do not make logical sense, but a lot of us choose things like fitting in for certain reasons. Like maybe I have one of my little neon lambs is she is in 5th grade this year. So kind of starting that really interesting puberty phase where so much is about fitting in. And it's been so interesting to see, from being a little kid where kids are like, la, 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 and they run around kind of being crazy and different. Right. And slowly, especially when they go through puberty, it's like, oh my God, I just don't want to stand out. What can I do to fit in? And so look at maybe where did you make, and just ask, like, where have I made choices, or what do I love about fitting in? And this is like, this might be crazy things that come up, like I don't have to be judged, or I'll have more friends, or I'll finally get the perfect relationship. Like, you might have decided really interesting things about what fitting in would give you. None of them are wrong. None of them are wrong. But it's when you have the awareness of it, then you can start to change it and be like, okay, maybe I chose that when I was 5 years old and I'm still running off of that choice. Or maybe this is something that I don't actually require anymore. Like, it might have served you at one point, and now are you ready for something different?
Yeah, that's great. I remember this one time when I had just moved from Dallas, Texas, up to, in the United States, up to Maryland when I was 13 years old. And I got on the school bus one day, and the bus went, "Hey, Betsy, how y'all doing?" And all eyes were on me, and I just felt myself go, oh my God, like, and not wanting to stand out, not wanting to have that kind of, like people were making fun of me and making fun of my accent, my Southern accent in, a different part of the country. And I remember that so clearly as one of the times where I was like, oh, I don't want to be different, and I worked really hard to try to get rid of the Southern accent. And, so it can be little things like that where, where you actually do it cognitively or you might not, and it's like not even something you think about, and you look at your own life and where are all those different places where you might have chosen to not have the spotlight on you. And then, here we are now, like, hey, what if you actually celebrate that you might have a Southern accent and no one around you does, or whatever it is, and actually not turn it down at all.
Yeah, that's such a good example. And like what you just said, not turn it down anymore. Because also, like, there's that, like, so many things we do as a kid to not, so that we do fit in. And then look at all those places that you turn it down because how much, too, is it seen as, I don't know, like selfish, or that you shouldn't choose how different you are, or you shouldn't acknowledge it because that would be, I don't know, arrogant, or you shouldn't like yourself that much, or you shouldn't like spend time looking for how you're different or wonderful. It's like, wow, wherever you bought those lies, like, would you return them to sender? Because that's not how you have to live your life from. But it's all those kind of crazy things where we've chosen to turn ourselves down, whether it's a little bit or a lot. And for a lot of us, it's like micro adjustments throughout our life of like, turn out a little bit here or a little bit here, but all of it results in you not being all of you. And the greatest, one of my favorite quotes from Dr. Dane here, who's one of the co-creator of Access Consciousness, and I might get this a little bit wrong, but it's like the greatest joy in life is being everything you are. And so there's so much happiness in actually finding all these parts and pieces and maybe turning it up here and turning it up there, that we start to get to, it's like, it's about, there's more joy and happy available. Really.
There truly, truly is. And there's something that you just said with the micro adjusting kind of through your life that kind of really stood out to me. And I wonder, how much of that, like, now we can go and like change that. So just because you chose it doesn't mean that you have to continue choosing it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yep. I mean, exactly. It's like anything. One of the things we talk about in Access, which is any choice you make is really only needs to be good for 10 seconds. And then you can choose something different. But often we choose something like to make a small adjustment to fit in with, maybe it's a certain person, maybe it's been a job, maybe it was a past lover or spouse or friend or whatever it is. And we choose, okay, I'm going to not be so much here because they don't like that, or it doesn't work well in this job. But then we like somehow think that now that choice must be forever, but it doesn't. Like that, there are some times where that actually might work, or you might have been aware of something, and it's like, but what you want to have available always is the choice to be everything and all of you when whatever works for you, and so it's like it's partly getting back to choice of all the energies available to you and what's fun, and you don't have to stick with things that you might have chosen a long time ago. And so part of changing it is really just being aware of it, which sounds easy, but it, but it really is like, and being gentle and kind with yourself. Like, okay, that might have not been like the smartest choice, but now it's okay. Like I chose it for however long, and now I'd actually like to show up a bit more in the world. I'd like to have more of me, and that is okay. It's not wrong that however long you've chosen something, and just knowing that you can change it now.
I love that. And that, so what if every day is a new day and an adventure that you get to choose? So what kind of things do you actually say to your daughter who's starting that, the peer pressure kind of things. What tips are you giving for her?
Oh my goodness, that's a good question. And part of it is allowance too, for knowing that this phase is what it is. But basically, we've had some conversations, when she's not doing her moody teenager, pre-teenager, mood. But we've had some conversations like, hey, whatever it is, you can come to me, and ask, you can have any conversation. There's nothing that you could be or do or choose that I would judge you for, and it's I feel like, at least when I was raised, and I had great parents, really, but I definitely, back then, parenting was about trying to get everything right or wrong, or get your kids to make the right or good choice.
Yes.
So they don't do the bad thing, and if they did it, then you somehow were a bad parent. And so a very different way of looking at that is just basically, I would like to empower my daughter, and look at this for if you are a parent or you have kids in your life, is true empowerment is so that she knows if she chooses something, what will that create, which is something I'm looking at, and you might be looking at if you're listening to this show. That's where true empowerment lies, is hey, you can choose anything. There isn't necessarily right or wrong, but it's all just a choice. And that's where the freedom lies, really. And so I just try to have conversations with her about, hey, you can put anything on the table. You can ask me about anything. There is no right or wrong. And when you have something that you're questioning, ask about it, because, I'm here to support you and not to judge you. So yes, we're parents. And also at this age, there's times where I've noticed it seems like being a friend can create a lot, because you want to have that dialogue open where they don't have to hide anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is something, for that. The safety, is what's coming in, the knowledge that you have given her that place where she can come to you and talk to you about anything.
Yeah.
Oh, here's our first break, everybody. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned to Impulsive Brilliance.
Free your mind with Om Times Radio, IOM FM.
Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. Om Times, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Are you a neon sheep pretending? That is our conversation today with Emily Russell. Emily, if somebody's interested, you mentioned that there is a Facebook group. Welcome back to Imperfect Brilliance, and we were talking about being a neon sheep, being willing to stand out. And I was asking Emily too, she mentioned that there's a Facebook group which is called the Neon Sheep Lounge. And Emily, could you tell everybody what your website is if somebody was looking for more information on how to play with you?
Absolutely. You guys can go to EmilyEvansRussell.com. And I feel like sometimes I have to spell that because people love to spell. Russell is somehow hard to spell, but EmilyEvansRussell.com, EmilyEvansRussell.com. And right on the homepage, there's a link that takes you to the free Facebook page. And we've also been doing this fun thing called Club Neon, which is like a monthly call and some other freebies and downloads and things for people that want to play that way too. But Facebook is open to everybody, and both of those things are there. And I just really love getting to contribute and see everybody there, contributing to each other. So we'd love to have more neon sheep. Yeah. And I say it's like sheep, but really you're just like a totally different creature. So it's a fun place to play.
It really is. And she also does have a free download on her website that has got some tips. And what else does it have on it? I forget.
It's like this, you can print it out and even put it on your fridge. It's 10 like kind of different questions or tools to basically be your difference, and which is one of the questions you asked me. We talked about, kind of going back and looking at why maybe you, not why, but for what reason did you choose these? And, would you like to choose something different now? And one of the other things, like this is, I think, one of the questions on the download is, what could I add to my life that would give me more of me? Because really, like, being a neon sheep is about being you. And if you're listening, you might have read, and if you haven't read, an amazing book called Being You, Changing the World by Dr. Dane Here. But it really is it's an adventure of kind of rediscovering who you are and getting rid of all the points of view of who you thought you should be or who you thought you had to be, and that kind of play of finding more out about you. And so that really simple question of like, what could I add to my life that would give me more of me, starts to tap into like, what's actually fun for you? What lights you up? What brings you joy? Like that you can even add little bits, like maybe it's spending 5 minutes a day on something new, or sitting in front of a beautiful painting, or walking outside barefoot, or whatever that might be, and being okay with whatever it is, because you are different from anyone else. So, what I would maybe ask that, I'm going to get a different awareness than you would, and neither are right or wrong. It's like, just add stuff that makes you happier.
Yes. And that, I wanted to ask you a little bit, there's been an energy as you've been talking through these different things of a celebratory of and embracing who you are. And I remember, as a kid at one point, I was like, I don't know who I am, and so if there are people who might have that as part of what's going on for them, how does the celebration and the embracing actually bring that out more?
That's a really good question. This is at least what I've found, and you guys can play with it and see if it's true for you. But when you basically acknowledge something or are grateful for it or celebrate it, those are all different energies, but a similar way of saying, hey, this is something I'm grateful for, I acknowledge about it, and about you, more of it can show up. Same if you're doing it for other people. Like if you have, children in your life, or a partner, or a great friend, or someone you work with, and you acknowledge that, or express gratitude. Wow, I'm so grateful that you add this to my life, or that you are in my world, or whatever that is. It allows more of it to show up. And so when you do that for you, and you sort of celebrate this difference of, wow, I'm grateful for all these weird things about me that I used to maybe think I had to judge or hide, but I don't anymore. And so when you acknowledge it and are grateful for it, it allows more to show up, more and more than you ever probably thought was there. That's why it's like this continuing adventure, because what I've seen is like I get to a layer and I'm like, okay, yay, I found this new thing. I'm more comfortable in my skin. I'm willing to stand out a bit more. And then there is always more.
So talk a little bit more about that there's always more.
Oh my goodness. I mean, and hopefully that's exciting. At least for me, it's exciting to not have an end point. And I remember I think it was one of the very first Access Consciousness classes I took. I went to like a little intro night, and Dr. Dane here was doing an intro class called The Taste of Being. And I remember one of the first things he said, and I'd watched some of his YouTube videos, and I've taken an Access Bars class, and I'm thinking, okay, here's this guy who must have know a lot about this consciousness thing and the whole path and all this. And I think in one of the first few minutes, he said, wow, what's amazing is if there were a book, to this discovery of consciousness and to being you, and there was like thousands of pages, he's like, I feel like I'm on about page 2. And the joy he had in that of like, oh my gosh, and there's so much more to go. And wow, it's on page 2. Everything's become so much more wonderful. Like, I wonder what else is possible. And I was like, oh my gosh, that. And it was so cool to see someone be so willing to say, hey, I'm somewhere, we're all in a different place in our lives and on the adventure that you're choosing, but there's always more if you'd like to. And there's not like a special path to follow, I've said, like, being a neon sheep it's not about following someone else's path, right? It's about you being a leader in your life and choosing what works for you and having fun along the way. And sometimes you might want to speed really fast through a whole bunch of change, and other times you might want to relax and enjoy the ride. And that's also the fun of it. It's not having to do it the way anyone else does.
Yes, I love that. And what about, what about along the way, let's say you stumble and fall?
Yeah, which we probably all will, right? Or do a lot. And I think, what's that? It's a funny, like, how many failed businesses has Richard Branson had? It's a ton. I forget the actual number.
Yes.
And if you look at most of the, think of someone you admire for whatever they're being in the world or have created in the world. And most of them were really willing to do something different, or at a certain point their lives went through a lot of failures to create what then maybe now is celebrated as a success or something you admire, whether it's, oh, he's amazing in business or super creative, or there's maybe a person who's just, whatever that is, something you admire. But when I look at that, if you look at those people, almost everyone has gone through major, quote, failures. But what if nothing is a failure? So if you stumble and fall, like, that's the gift. Like, I love the title of your show, Imperfect Brilliance, right?
Yeah.
It's like, we don't have to be perfect. And that's the part about this adventure of being a neon sheep. And I think right now with, the social media is interesting because a lot of it can, people portray this perfect image, or you can think, oh my God, their life looks perfect, and judge yourself. And it's like, oh no, we still don't need to be. That is the destruction of joy, trying to get everything right and perfect. And so it's the falling along the way, picking yourself, having fun, is where the magic is. It's not going to be easy all the time, and that's okay.
Well, and
it doesn't have to be perfect.
Sorry. There is so much there with, the rejection and perfectionism, and the other person, as you were talking about Richard Branson, also Walt Disney was rejected 300 times for Mickey Mouse and his theme park. And you think about that 300 times, where many, many people probably would have given up. And he didn't give up. He kept going. He knew he had something different and unique to, to contribute to the world. And can you imagine if we didn't have Mickey Mouse and we didn't have Walt Disney in our lives? Just like the joy that it brings for so many people. It's just amazing.
And it's so funny. Dr. Seuss is the same story. I think he got rejected something insane too. Like, you're like, wow. But that's it. There was some brilliant quote I heard recently on perseverance is not that you're going to keep going, but it's that when you fail, or don't quote succeed, that you still keep going. So that's the gift, is picking yourself up every time and being like, okay, what awareness do I have now that I didn't have before? Like, what's right about this? And it's okay to, fall. And even if you want to be cranky for a while, or, it's okay too. But when you have these questions and tools, then you can keep going, and what I found is consciousness never gives you something you can't handle. And it's always greater on the other side if you just keep moving forward. And you can do that at your own pace. You can, phone a friend, ask for help, listen to a podcast, whatever it is. But if you keep going, consciousness and the universe has more to gift you than you could possibly imagine. And that's that thing of like, it doesn't have to end. You can keep choosing and going, because it really is beyond anything we can conceive of how much is available and how much happiness you can have and how different you can be.
Yes. And aren't we lucky that there is not a finite supply of happiness and joy and choice and everything?
Yeah. And how much of us thought that there was? I mean, I know.
Yeah.
I remember one time having a conversation looking at, like, we talk about ask, and if you ask for something, ask and receive, right? And how many of us have thought, well, if I ask for it, it somehow like depletes the magical warehouse of taking away from other people. And it's like, no, your ask invites more for others, not like ask and take away from others. It's ask, receive, and that only adds more to the possibilities for everybody else looking and asking.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And that's the beauty of it. Yeah, and it's so funny. I don't know, but it's like the way this world works is we're kind of taught the opposite, or at least to believe the opposite, to not stand out. I think depending on what country you're in, every country has a different term for it. I know in Australia they call it the tall poppy, like you don't want to stand out from anybody else. And I think almost every country has something like that, where it's like, don't be too much. Or, we were talking about social media. It's always interesting to me to see when people are willing to just kind of be out there and put themselves out there in the arena of being alive, whatever they're doing, and the judgments that people throw at you, like, especially through like a comment on a YouTube video or a Facebook post, and you're like, wow, that is, it is what it is. If you're going to be different, you will receive those judgments, and judgments are just judgments. They're not real, and they're definitely not a reason to stop yourself. And if you have been stopping yourself for judgment in the past, it's okay. And look at now, like, that's one of the greatest gifts I've received from Access, is that willingness to turn it up and be like, okay, if I didn't stop in the face of this, what else could I actually choose? Because those people aren't going to be there at the end of your life, They might still have their judgments and everything, but you're going to be the one that got to live your life.
That is so true. And, so in asking that question, Emily, what has that unlocked for you when you have stopped yourself?
Oh, like when I've stopped myself in the face of judgment versus not?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I mean, and it's so insidious. I remember, like, when my daughters were really young, I used to live in Indiana, which is like the Midwest of the United States. It's where I grew up. And I remember just even going to like maybe a parenting group meeting, where I'd take my kids, and I'd go to get dressed. I remember like going to put on earrings and being like, those might be a little too much, or purposely dressing down so I wouldn't make anyone else feel uncomfortable. And I did it with so quickly, it just seemed like, well, that's what you just do here. Like, why would I want to make someone else feel uncomfortable or receive the judgments of, I don't even know what, but from the other moms or the other people. And at one point I was like, this is crazy. Like, what would be fun for me to put on today? Or, what would my body like to wear? Or, for whatever. I mean, that's a small thing, but it's also like, look at those places where you do that. That seems so just natural to do and then, as I got, my kids got older and I moved away and now I live in Tennessee. I mean, it doesn't matter where you live. People judge you no matter where you are. And it's just so much more fun when you don't have to pause and think, what is someone going to think? And it's also not even that cognitive. You just naturally have turned stuff down. But now it's like, it's more about what could I choose today that would bring me more happiness? Like that, it seems simple, but if you have that like on a Post-it note somewhere or just in your world, and that's your operating question versus how do I, bend, fold, turn myself down so I fit in, which for a lot of us is almost how we've run our lives without even thinking about it. But if you go for the happiness, that's what I've found is life has been a lot more easy. I would say I probably receive more judgment, but I'm not as I'm not as affected by it. It just is kind of like, okay, that's there, So I wouldn't say it goes away. It's it's more like you get to have more fun with it or just not really pay attention much.
And that's such a great way of describing it. So, it doesn't really go away. You choose to not be at the effect of it anymore. And in that choice, it really does open up freedom for you and your life and what you would like to choose. And so when you are aware of other people choosing that, do you judge back or what do you do?
That's such a great question because it is interesting. If you have something that bugs you so much about someone else, look at that and ask, where am I being or doing that, or where have I been and done that? Because usually if it drives you nuts when someone else turns themselves down or someone else is like, oh no, I'm being judged, this is so horrible, and it bugs you, look at like, oh man, am I doing that? Is that something that like I judge about myself or where I've turned myself down? Because it's funny, it wouldn't probably bother you unless somewhere you're judging yourself for it or you've been there, done that. And so it's like, let's start with kindness and for you so that you can be kindness for other people and have allowance for, you never know where someone is and, ever until you've walked in their shoes. It's like, don't judge someone. And that is a gift in itself, so it's easy to, and I always like want the world for people. So I'm like, but you can choose so much more, don't stop yourself, but you've got to be an allowance of where we're all at and what we're choosing now. Because sometimes you need to be stopped by judgment for a while until you go, this sucks, enough of this, I'm not choosing anymore. We all require a different impetus to go, I'm choosing something different. So it's like, you never want to judge yourself or anyone else, because everyone has a different creation of their life based on the choices they are making and what works for them in the moment. And then you come across like Access Consciousness and a podcast like this with all these different tools, and you can start looking at, okay, maybe this is something I want to play with right now, or I'd like to choose to maybe not be the effect of judgment anymore. Where do I start? And there are so many places. Recently, Dr. Dane Here's been doing a new series of YouTube kind of interviews based off of his Being You, Changing the World book. But we just did a recent one where I got to interview him. And we talked about In the Face of Judgment, Turn It Up, which might be a really fun one to watch because it's so interesting. Yeah. Actually, the first 30 minutes of it, and we mentioned this about halfway through, like, oh my God, we're both turning it down. Like, it's just this energy, and it's you'll be energetically aware of this, like, slight, like, it's not as fun. It's it was hard to, like, follow and ask questions. It was so interesting. And finally he's like, what am I doing? And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing it too. And then you can feel this giant shift. And and here we are talking about the topic, and the beginning of it, succumbing to that energy of just slightly turning it down for whatever reason, probably because we're talking about the topic, but it's like, it's okay to have that happen and go on. So that might be a cool thing to watch because it's a real-time example of how we do that, and it's not wrong, and you can choose to change anything in the moment too.
Oh, I love that example. And we are at our second break. Hold on, you guys, for some more juicy, yummy, just a couple minutes.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Om Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Om Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Hey, hon, what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No, I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Imperfect Brilliance, where I have the pleasure today, and you all as well, of listening to Emily Russell as we are talking all about being different and her creation called Neon Sheep, and she's got a free Facebook group called the Neon Sheep Lounge, and then she's also got a paid monthly program that is called the Club Neon, where she dives into so much more about what we are talking about today. And if you're interested in it, you can check it out on her website at EmilyEvansRussell.com. And she also has mentioned, yes, it is. Sorry about that. And she also mentioned a couple of times, and I would like to give you guys a little bit more information. The founder of Access Consciousness, who is Dr. Dane Heer, and his last name is spelled Heer, and he's got all kinds of things out on the internet, on YouTube. He's got a weekly tour of consciousness where he does a free video and just all kinds of free information about what we're talking about today and way more. His book, which is wonderful, one of the first books that I read that really introduced me to such a different way of being and thinking in the world. And I kind of was always looking for this. And when I started reading that book, I was like, oh my God, it just opened up all these doors that I kind of felt like I was banging my head against and didn't know how to open. And just these tools and questions have opened up so many possibilities. And like Emily said earlier, it's like it never ends. And there's just more and more and more you can choose. So that book is called Being You, Changing the World. And it's translated in a bunch of languages. There's also an audio book. So if that interests you at all, if you're like kind of getting a ping as we're talking, you can find that on Amazon. And he's written a lot of other amazing books, but if you're looking for something different, that might be somewhere to start, and you'll know what will work for you. And we're just here to share some possibilities and ideas with you. Anything you would like to add to that, Emily?
Oh, just it's funny when you tell that story, because I remember first reading the Being You book too, and like laying on my couch and I could not stop reading. I was like, oh my goodness. It was like everything I knew, but also never had heard put into words. And it's just funny because it reminds me of when I think back to me then and just the different energies in my world and how different that is from now. And it's like, that's the magic of playing with a lot of this stuff, as things just kind of change like magic if you're willing to have it. And like you said, that book's in so many languages. And if you go to Dane's website, it's drdanehere.com. And there's also all of the YouTube videos. I think we did like 8 or 9 of those so far, like kind of extrapolations on the book too. So it just adds in a different way these interviews with Dane, the author, about some of the chapters and topics and stuff too. And those are also translated, which is really great.
Oh, that's fabulous. That is fabulous. And so for, this conversation today, we have just we've gone all over the place and back again, and had so much fun talking about celebrating your difference. And, I'm a very visual person, Emily. And so what I'm thinking, as I'm going to ask you this question, I totally can see this in my mind, where you've got the outer coat of a white sheep, and you go to, how they shear the sheep, and underneath the shearing is actually the beautiful neon color of the individual sheep. And so what else could we contribute to people listening today, where as they're shearing off maybe the outer layers of whatever it is that they thought they had to be, and they celebrate and invite their individual neon colors to show through, what else would you like to contribute to them?
Oh, I think I said this before, but one, be patient with yourself and kind with yourself. I feel like, and there's been times where I've been like this too, where it's like, I'm not choosing enough. I'm not getting there fast enough. And whenever I am doing that, I'll tell you what, it definitely doesn't contribute to more change. It's like slows me down, and we are so quick to judge ourselves, even for the journey of like having more in our lives, like more consciousness, like that. It makes no sense. Because consciousness, I love Access's definition of consciousness. Consciousness includes everything and everyone, and judges nothing and no one, including yourself. So it's like, let's not be hard on ourselves when we're doing that. And when you can kind of relax and be kind with yourself, it opens up a space for receiving more of the difference of you. Like if it weren't this constant frantic seeking, which that energy does, like the energy of desiring more is such a gift. And that's why I think most people probably listening to this would call themselves a seeker, or we would say you're probably seeking something different, and that contributes. And then there's also a time where this constant, like, I'm not going fast enough, or thinking that you have to get somewhere you're not, is actually a way of we slow ourselves down. And so if you could just receive the gift of you and truly, like, you could ask something as simple as, universe, show me the brilliance of me, show me the gift of me, and really, like, I'm willing to, like, however that shows up, and be vulnerable with yourself. And, if you have a friend or someone in your life that doesn't judge you, doesn't expect you to be something you're not, doesn't judge you for being this way or not being this way, maybe ask them, like, hey, what's different or unique about me that you see? Because when you are really being you actually don't know. It's hard for us to see our differences because you're just like, isn't everybody that way? But they're not. Yes. They're not. But of course you think they are because you are this. So it really helps if you have someone that doesn't judge you, and you could say, hey, what is unique about me? Or ask the universe to show you, or, ask like, wow, what is different about me? Or think of a time when you felt really alive and happy, and we're really being you. And there's a great story in the Being You Changing the World book we keep talking about, where Dr. Dane talks about that and invites you to look at that. So look at, like, where was a time in your life where you were really being you. And that also might clue you into the energy of how you're different. And then allow that more of it to show up and being that kindness and gentleness with you. And when you're being that, like one of my favorite questions is asking, what is possible for me that I think is not possible, that if I would allow the possibilities would actualize a totally different reality? It's a beautiful question. And it's also like there's something different possible for you than anyone else. I mean, when you started the show, and this is like what I put in, I think, one of the descriptions for the Neon Sheep Lounge, because it really gets me, is like if you don't choose that difference about you, the world isn't going to have access to it, because you really do have something different than any other person or creature on this planet has to offer. And so the more you kind of explore, the more you get to gift to the world, to other people, and the more you get to receive of you, and your life probably will get a lot easier and more fun, which is wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that element of kindness to yourself, kindness to others into this conversation. As we definitely, you know, I'm sure pretty much most of us are very, you know, can be our harshest critics. And if you're willing to actually give up that title, you know, and retire that and be kind to yourself and choose something different, if you start to go to something where maybe in the past you've beaten yourself up over, it's like, oh, but just because I did it before doesn't mean I have to do it again. And what could I choose now, right? And would you mind repeating that question? It was so beautiful, and my whole body just relaxed when you said it.
Yeah. Ask, what is possible for me that I think is not possible, that if I would allow the possibilities, would actualize a totally different reality. And it's that, I love it because it's what's possible for you that you think isn't possible, because your mind really only can kind of catalog what it's seen other people do, what it thinks is right or wrong, okay, I've done this in the past, maybe this would be possible. And you might be able to imagine some pretty cool stuff, but when you go beyond that, like anything you could even think is possible, that's that magic of the universe getting to contribute in ways way greater than you've probably experienced. So that it opens up, and then I love the other part of the question is that if you would allow the possibility. So there's not a force. It's like, let's allow those to come in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, so in that allowing it to come in, again, you're in this relaxed state. You're not forcing anything. You're not controlling it. And you're just like, I wonder what's going to show up.
Yeah.
And then that willingness to be, you know, delightfully surprised and acknowledge everything that shows up is another component to this, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You know, and that acknowledging it allows it to actualize, which means it shows up in your life. And it's and having that joy or adventure of having fun with seeing what does show up and being like, okay, universe, like I'm going to let go of control here and try to having to figure everything out. And I'm just going to every day choose something different, you know, ask like, what could I choose that would give me more of me? Ask, if I were being the neon sheep I truly am, what would I choose? What different reality or possibilities would be available? And then just going about your day and playing and choosing things that are fun. And somehow you may find that you are all of a sudden living a life with less judgment and more possibilities and more energy and creativity than when you're trying to get it right or trying to work so hard or trying to figure out how to have a different life. It's like, that's actually, what if it could be a lot easier?
Well, Emily, I do have a question for you on what you just said there. Is that perhaps what you've created with your life?
Yeah. I would say that is yes. And I have loved being in control before, and I'm still constantly like, wonder how much more I could let go of trying to figure everything out and get it, and the more as I do that and get over trying to get things right and trying to control the way it's going to show up, it's like, wow, there is a ongoing kind of offering from the universe of it really can be easier. Are you willing to have it be that easy? Really? Okay, do something different. I'm like, okay, really? and it is. It's true. And there comes that judgment piece again, because how much are you choosing to kind of turn it down or not have that much ease because other people would judge it? Like, you have it too easy, or you're doing this or doing that. It's like, okay, what if you could welcome that all too? And how much ease would you be willing to receive?
Wow, what a beautiful way to end this conversation today. Emily, thank you so much for being with us today. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Betsy, so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
You're so welcome. Everybody have a wonderful week. EmilyEvansRussell.com, and my website is creatingyumminess.com. Check it out, you guys. Come play in the Neon Sheep Lounge on Facebook. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.